got it, ladies and gentlemen. Andy's back. Sorry.
Back again.
Let me tell you the text I got.
Intro music.
Let me tell you the text I got last night from Andy. Hey, I'm surprised at how well the episode you did without me has done.
I did not say that.
It said something close to that.
I did not say without me. I said I did not expect this last episode to be this popular.
Right. And what was different about the last episode as opposed to all the other episodes?
Was me not having the opportunity to clap back when you had criticized me.
Right.
So I didn't get a chance to share about how I handle criticism. That's what was lacking.
Right. Well, clearly people loved it. So just proof again that that Andy is an accoutrement. He is an add-on. He is beautiful. He's a trophy wife to the Vox podcast. It's beautiful.
Give me my own reality show.
Tell me, what nicknames do you have for Shepherd so far? Shep to the Shep?
Shep to the Shep. Shep. Yeah. I mean,
Sheppy?
Shepherd.
Sheppy?
Baby.
Sheppy.
Sheppy.
Sheppy? Come on, man. No Purd?
Yeah, no, I don't go Purd. I know we have some other big fans of Purd out there.
Yep. Purd has joined the herd.
Purd has joined the
So
herd.
Andy is here, remarkably alert, with 3 children under the age of 5, and Mercedes is doing okay.
Yes, better than okay.
Yeah.
I think we're
good.
We're happy. We're excited. We got a new baby.
Damn straight, you got a new baby.
Right.
There are people out there that would love to be able to have
Yes.
babies. So
Yes,
for
there
crying
are.
out loud.
Yeah.
So anyway, Shepherd, this one's for you, buddy. We've got a great conversation lined up for us today. A guy named Micah Bournes. Is that how I say it?
I mean,
I called him Bourne.
you're Micah Bournes. You're just thinking of Bourne Identity. You're
Is that what it is?
That.
Is it Boye?
No, it's Bourne.
Bourne.
I don't think it's Bourne. Yay.
Man, hashtag so white.
It's a French name though. That's why it's funny.
Bourne.
Bourne.
Oh, Bourne. Born A.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
sure,
good.
That's close enough.
Born this A. So anyway, Micah is a rock star. Let me tell you about this guy. So our friend Izzy, who is our resident artist at Vox Community, brought in Micah. He's like, you're going to love this guy. He's a spoken word artist. And he just freaking killed it. And so we've had him back and we're like, we got to get this guy on the podcast. I mean, he's so articulate. He's 28. Yeah. He is articulate. He is it's such great thoughts about race. And, we hate having a black guy on to talk about race. But it's better than...
But if we did it without it, then everyone would be like, way to go and talk about race without a black guy in the room.
Exactly. So we... we're calling this episode "The Art of Race" because his spoken word thing really is able to communicate in ways that are very interesting. So, as always, I mean, we don't bring guests on and think that everyone will, agree with everything that's said. But man, we think this guy's thought provoking and is worthy of a good listen. So anyway, here is Micah Bourne Yay or Bourne A. I probably call him all 3 things here in the interview. So hope you enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is so thrilling for us to be here with our friend Micah. Micah, say hello.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
This is Micah Bourne. He is 28 years old.
Yep.
He is of a different color. So I don't know if you can know that. Like people say, I don't see color. I see color. And right now I see half Filipino and I see full African American, and then I see me, which is kind of translucent. But we are glad. And Micah is a friend of Izzy's, who is our resident artist, and he's performed, but has he's just become a friend of our community, and we're excited to have him on the show. Yeah. Micah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Grew up in Long Beach.
Yeah, my name is Micah Bournes. I am.
Bourne.
Yeah, it's all good.
Damn.
Yo, that's French. That's French right there.
So that's okay. So the Caucasian version, Born. The real version, Bourne.
Ironically.
Yes, exactly. Okay, sorry.
It's all good. Yeah, but no, I was born and raised in Long Beach, California. So
Love
I'm
that.
local here in Southern California. Yeah.
And then were you raised in a church, in a Christian family? What was your family life like?
Yeah, I was. My parents met at church actually, and I've been going to church since the womb. So
Boom.
it's something I grew up with. And like most people, you just kind of roll with what you're born into. You don't expect your parents to be lying to you about things as important as the universe and God and truth, right?
But what about Santa Claus?
Well, my parents, they never.
See,
my dad. My mom and my dad had this thing.
That's
so
why you turned out okay.
we never got Christmas presents from our parents, and they say Christmas is Jesus' birthday, not yours. And so with that though, like it was a real, like they were not Grinches. We celebrated Christmas, we put up a manger scene, all this stuff, but they would say, look, on your birthday, we get you what you want, right? We think about what you like. So on Christmas, we ain't finna buy you presents on somebody else's birthday. If it's Jesus' birthday, then we got to think about, if we're going to give Jesus a gift, what would he want? And so every year for Christmas, our family would find another family who is less fortunate than us, or do something together and say, hey, this is how we give Jesus a birthday gift.
Okay, we're done with the interview. This is indicting already.
But yeah, so we never got presents.
Oh my goodness.
But we didn't miss it. We didn't feel like we missed out on anything, because we still had Christmas dinner. We still celebrated. We still put up decorations.
I love it.
Yeah.
And you have brothers and sisters?
Oh yeah, I'm one of 6.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then did they all go to Bible college, or just you?
Nah, I was the only one.
Yeah, tell me about that. What was that like?
Well, it was interesting. Because I grew up in a very multicultural environment in Long Beach. I mean, a classroom at my high school looked like the United Nations, every culture you could think of.
I love that.
And then I went to a Bible college in the Midwest, and I get there, and it was severely lacking diversity. And it was really hard at first, because folks who were supposed to be my brothers and sisters in Christ, but they were doing and saying things that were so ignorant, so hurtful. And so I got my freshman year, I was very bitter, and I was ready to leave, transfer. I was like, man, forget this, like these racists supposed to be Christians. But then I remember one time particularly, I got in a conversation with this cat, and we were talking for like 10 minutes in my dorm room. And he said, Micah, this is the longest I've ever talked to a black person. And I thought to myself, wow. And then he goes on to say, I'm from a small town in the Midwest. And he goes, there's only one black family in our entire town, and we didn't really know them. And so I thought, okay, for me, what got me through the 4 years of school was, after that conversation, having this realization that I didn't choose to be born into a diverse city. I just was, right? And I learned and I benefited from that in some ways, but then I'm sure I have limitations because of that too. But this dude, he didn't even have an opportunity to make a friend with anyone from another culture, because where he grew up, there just was no diversity. Right. And so, of course, if you grow up in a small town that doesn't have any minorities, then every thought you have about people other than you is a stereotype, even if it's positive, because it's like, or I should say it's a prejudice, because prejudice just means to prejudge. And so it's like, for me, I made the distinction between racism and prejudice, because I think racism comes from hate. Right? If you're a racist and you say all black people are stupid, and I parade a line of 50 black doctors and intellectuals and brilliant black folks, you would still say all black people are stupid. If you're prejudiced, you say all black people are stupid, because I never met any black people, and everything I'm told by these other people tell me black people are stupid. Then I introduce you to black people, and you go, oh, actually, he's pretty smart. I ran into a lot of prejudice, because there was a lot of white people from a lot of communities that were not diverse. And it was hard. But when I realized it wasn't necessarily coming from hate, it gave me the patience and grace to be like, all right, let me explain to you why you can never do that or say that again.
What were things? I mean, just because I think we're all guilty at some point of some of these things. What were things that would happen that would be examples of prejudice but not hate, that you were picking up on your freshman year?
Totally. I want to talk on like the institutional level of the school, and not necessarily the personal.
Got it.
In between, because there was a lot of like just like comments and stuff. But I think overall the environment felt unintentionally unwelcoming.
Okay.
Because there were things that were done. There were beliefs that the school had, that they weren't trying to be discriminatory, but because there was such an overwhelming majority of one culture, they were. So, for example, chapel, right? We had chapel 3 times a week. Now, the overwhelming majority of the songs that were sung in chapel were songs that were common in predominantly white expressions of church community. You know, you have Hillsong and like kind of traditional white hymns, and also the style of the music and expression in general, right? Was very just kind of like simple. And I remember my freshman year several times them singing songs that I had never heard in my life. And I'm looking around and everybody else in the auditorium knows every word, right? And so, and I'm never hearing any songs out of the African-American tradition of church, unless it's February, Black History Month. And we have the gospel choir singing 3 Kirk Franklin songs because he's the only, he's the only gospel artist that white people know, right? And so when you're in chapel, and like, I remember so distinctly, I was like, how? Is this a popular song? Why does everybody know this but me? So I just, right there, kind of felt like on the outside of this inside thing, right?
Yeah.
And again, and the songs from my culture were never ever incorporated,
right?
In at least not in regular rotation. And so there was that. There were also things, for example, the school had these rules. It was called the SLG, the Student Life Guide, and so one of the things, it said no extreme or distracting hairstyles, right? And this was a rule written a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then it said that, but then it got specific. And so it said no unnatural hair dye. So you could dye your hair like brown or something, but you couldn't dye it like blue or purple, which is fine, whatever.
Okay.
But then it specifically said male students are not allowed to have dreadlocks or braids.
Come on.
And I went,
and I'm looking at Micah right now.
and I
in
went
violation.
Well, at the time, actually, I didn't have either. I had an afro, had a big fro. But I went to the dean. Well, first I wrote him a letter, and then he sent me an email and said, "Hey, can we meet?" And I said, "Look, I guarantee you, there's never been a white male student who decided not to come to Moody because he didn't want to cut his locks.
Right.
Because he didn't want to take the braids out of his hair."
Right.
I said, in the African-American community, for a man to have locks or braids, especially at the time, that is not extreme or distracting.
Right.
It could be very professional. It could be very neat, very clean.
Right.
I was like, whenever this rule was written, thinking of their all white students, I'm sure it made sense in their head at the time.
Right.
But I was like, you're only deterring minorities. Also, with beliefs, like, and then just the way things run, like, not only there are charismatic expressions of white churches that have charismatic theology, but for the most part, a lot of more expressive branches of the faith are minority communities, Black,
right,
Latino,
right.
all these things. So when you have doctrines like cessationism, right, being taught as
that's the view that all of the charismatic gifts
all the
ceased.
miraculous gifts,
Yes.
so like speaking in tongues and healing and all of
prophecy.
these things, like those kind of like ended with the death of the apostles, like that era.
Right.
And God can still do it, but he doesn't necessarily do it through us anymore.
That's
like
right.
This is the general idea. Now, in class, we were taught multiple views, and cessationism though was like, this is the right view,
Right.
and then these are the other views, and people still might be saved, but this is not.
Right.
Like, it was kind of like this is what's really real, and then these are some other options that other Christians might believe. But what that created in me was this idea that I realized when I left Moody. I would go when I would visit, because I travel a lot for work in my poetry, and I would be like, the way it actually played out was I was looking at all like charismatic and predominantly minority expressions of church with a side eye, like, oh, y'all not quite solid because you worship like this, or you do like this. And then the good Orthodox solid biblical churches just happen to always be the white churches,
and
and I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Pockets.
Oh, wait a minute. Like, the outplaying of this theology is, instead of starting with fellowship and brotherhood and sisterhood, I'm starting with skepticism of anybody who doesn't think like this, you know, and I'm like,
well, was that a reflection of the makeup of the faculty?
Well, I think it was just a reflection of the overall idea. And this is, we kind of started this interview before the interview because we got here
goodness.
and couldn't wait.
Oh,
We started
so
talking.
So go
yeah,
there.
yeah. So like, there was one cat at my school. His name was Tyrone, and he was from Jamaica. And I was talking to him one time, and he was saying, yo, you know, one of the hardest parts, he's like, I come from an all-black community in Kingston, Jamaica. And he goes, all my teachers were white, all of my friends, everybody was white, or excuse me, was black growing up, that is. And he goes, and then I get to Moody, and it's just the opposite. He's like, my roommates, my classmates, the professors, it's like everything's white. And then he made a comment that made me think, and he goes, even the textbooks, he's like, pretty much all of the books, the authors of the texts that we use, all of the theologians we study and reference, they're all white.
Right.
And
that's true.
And I was like, huh. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I love A.W. Tozer and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Soren Kierkegaard and all these Christian theologians and philosophers who have great things to say. But when he said that, I realized, whoa, like the entirety of my formal Christian education was coming from one culture and gender.
Right.
And I thought to myself, it is impossible for my theology to be well balanced and to be reflective of the truth if I'm literally letting one culture and gender teach me everything there is to know about God and how to think. All the philosophers and all the theologians I read were white guys. And so I thought, oh man, and this is how I try to explain white privilege to people, both inside and outside the church. So white privilege is not saying that everywhere I go, you know, I'm treated less than white people, right? There's plenty places I go where I'm treated pretty much exactly equal, like when I go to certain restaurants, whatever. But like white privilege, that's not what it means. What it means is when you look in American society at any institution. So if we're talking about government, if we're talking about higher education, if we're talking about big business, if we're talking about the church, you rise to the top of these institutions and you say, who is in positions of power in government? Who is in positions of power in higher education? Who is in the positions of power of big business? Overwhelmingly so, in every pillar of society, the people with the power and the influence and the resource are white men to like 85, 90%, you know, like, and so I say, if that is the case, then even without them intentionally trying to skew things to benefit themselves, it's just going to happen by default because we all look at things through the lens of who we are in our culture. So I said, you know, if you were to flip the number of white men in Congress with Asian women or Latin men or black people, like, don't you think naturally just that inverse amount would change the way the country was run? If there was as many Asian women in government as there were white men, and they are making decisions as to what's best for the nation,
Healthcare.
How we should spend our money, healthcare.
Military.
It would look so different.
Right.
And that does not mean that they would be in this conspiracy to make the country benefit Asian women, but it would happen naturally if there was that great of an imbalance, if we had 90% Asian women as our politicians. It just would happen. And so that's what I'm saying.
So how do you see it in church? How do you see this play out in church? So you saw it in a Christian Bible college with the books you were reading, the professors. How do you see this play out in church?
To me, it's the same. It's the overall Christian culture. And when I say Christian, more specifically, let's say like kind of conservative evangelical culture, because that's what I grew up in, right? And so I saw it at my Bible college, but it was the same thing at church. It's the same thing at Christian radio. You know, like my mom used to always listen to Christian radio growing up, but it was always Alistair Begg and the Bible Answer Man and a bunch of and a bunch of white guys and Chuck, you know, Papa Chuck, and all these things, and it's like, and John MacArthur and all dudes with great things to say,
right?
But they never had, I don't want to say never, but they very seldom had anything else. And so with church, even the church I went to growing up, it was the same thing. It was ethnically diverse because of the neighborhood it was in. Like you look around and you saw faces of every color. But when it actually came to the leadership of the church, when it actually came to the type of songs we would sing and where those songs came from, and when it came to the style of preaching and the style the church was run, the diversity was very superficial. The pastor was white, and the culture of the way the church was run was white. The only thing diverse about it was actually the skin tones, but like there was not these other cultures incorporated into the fabric and the life of the church.
Got it.
You know, and so one thing we were talking about earlier was superficial unity and superficial diversity. I think a lot of people just want to see a bunch of faces of different colors and feel good.
And that's it. Well, hold on a second,
Yeah.
because that's what we do at conferences now, right?
Yeah.
So if you just see a conference that's all white men,
Yeah.
we just realize, okay, they're dumb, it's ridiculous. But now, we'll sprinkle in a black man and a woman or whatever.
And propaganda will perform.
Or yes. and that's the kind of superficiality. Or we'll have a gospel choir in to lead worship during Black History Month or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the kind of superficiality we're talking about, correct?
Absolutely. It's and it's one that again celebrates usually just like the fun parts, the easily digestible parts of diversity. Like
The skin.
everyone loves diversity if we're talking about food and music, right?
Right.
Because they can really sing and it sounds really good and this tastes good. Yeah, I love diversity.
Right.
But when you start to talk about actually giving up power, when you talk about actually letting people talk instead of just letting them be there and sing and entertain, like listening to them as they're talking about how frustrating it is to be I've been a faithful member of this church, for 10 years, 15 years, and it's been a struggle every day. Why is that? And like what has been hard? Like we don't necessarily give space for those conversations, for those rebukes. And again, to sacrificing power and incorporating to not have the celebration of diversity be this tokenizing thing. I love Black History Month. I love that it exists, but I hate the fact that so often African Americans on an everyday life are such a significant part of American culture, but in institutions and particularly Christian institutions, like we only celebrate them in these designated times. It's like, hey, can we have gospel music or can we have Black speakers, like year round, like invited and also not only invited to talk about racial issues,
right?
Like can they just talk about theology? You know what I'm saying? Of all things, and again, it was interesting because so many things that I was taught this is how I see it in church expressed. Like so many things that I thought were just orthodox biblical theology were really just white people's theology, and it was white male theology. And the thing is, even like when it comes to women in leadership and ordination of women, like that was something that I was always just trying to be faithful to what I was taught was true, right? And any church expression that ordained women, right? I looked at them, like they're liberal, they don't care, they don't believe what the Bible says,
Right.
But then I look at very, very conservative expressions of Black church.
Right.
And for centuries, Black people have been ordaining women.
Right.
Right. And they've been trying to be faithful to the Bible. So I'm like, okay, wherever you land on this, like it was a lie that I thought like all solid, Christian communities that actually care about the Bible would come to this conclusion. Like, actually, that's just conservative white church, and this is conservative Black church.
It's the Bible. I'm sorry.
And it's
the Bible was written by white men. Didn't you know that?
Yeah. Well, now you just sound like one of them liberals.
Well, exactly, right. But I'm up here, and I'm like, I know these expressions of Black church are not liberal by any means,
right?
And yet, on this particular issue, they like see no problem, and so it's like, oh, there are other ways of thinking about this.
So what's a non-superficial unity look like?
What does non-superficial unity look like?
Or diversity?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's a lot of tough conversations. I just, the superficial unity is most expressed, as some of you kind of said earlier, is like this whole, there is no color in Christ, right? I don't see color.
Right.
And so it's people looking at our differences as an obstacle to be overcome.
Right.
If we can only overcome our differences, then we can have unity. And I say, no, actually, unity requires differences. It doesn't take any type of godliness or love or patience or humility or fruit of the Spirit to be unified with people who think and act and do exactly like you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
so
right.
So to kind of reorient how we think about diversity and difference is like not seeing it as an obstacle to be overcome.
Right.
Seeing it as a gift that if we embrace and invite, we become more Christ-like, as God has distributed gifts throughout all types of people and people groups. And so, but that's a difficult thing, you know, because we grow up with our culture, and a lot of people think their way of seeing the world is the right way, right?
Why are these conversations so difficult, do you think?
I mean, in America particularly, because America has always been about race. From the founding to this day, like, so many aspects of American culture, it's just one of the racial tensions and racial prejudice has just been woven into the fabric of who we are. And so it's always a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
But I think it becomes more difficult when you're trying to wash over it with theology. So again, it's like, oh, there is no color in Christ. Can't we just all be brothers and sisters? Right. And I tell people, no. It's not that there is no color in Christ. There's every color in Christ. And we shouldn't try to ignore those differences to be unified. We should celebrate. We should be humble. We should realize that we're not always right. You know, and also to the majority culture, you have to sacrifice power. You have to, there's a quote that, I don't know who said it first, but basically, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it more or less, the loss of privilege feels like oppression to people who are used to having, 18 of the 20 seats at the table.
Right.
When you tell them you only get 2 seats, it's like, oh, you took away 16 of our seats. Like,
right.
Yes, because you had 16 too many.
Right.
And now, instead of having 18, you have 2 and everybody else has 2. Right. And so, yes, your power and your influence is a lot less, but it's a lot more equal now. And we're learning from each other, instead of learning from you and then in your generosity, giving up 2 or 3 seats and praising yourself for being welcoming to diversity. I think it's going to take a radical shift of realizing that what we've called church in a lot of American expressions is just culture, and particularly the majority culture, white culture. And so that you have to be willing to sacrifice to give up that power that should have never been yours in the first place.
So how do you do it in a way that doesn't feel token? So here's what I mean. So were you going to say something?
Oh, I maybe have a question that's on the same lines.
Okay.
But
No, I was just going to say, on the one hand, if you just put white people talking about race, it's automatically disqualified. If you invite a black person in to talk about race, it can feel, I don't know, token or whatever. So how do you do that in a way that honors and communicates respect?
To do it regularly.
Got it.
I think it becomes token when it's once a year.
Got it.
When it's twice a year.
Okay.
When you, and particularly now in this time,
we're going to release this episode in February. Just so you know.
This is perfect for my question. So go ahead and answer that, and then I have a follow up.
Yeah, like if you communicate to your community or your congregation, hey, this is not a 3-week series that we're going to have real quick, then move on to relationships, or, no. Like, this is a crisis that has been for centuries in our nation and currently is flaring its head uglier than ever. And so in all of our theology, in the American context, like race when we're talking about justice, when we're talking about romance, when we're talking about anything, all of these can be affected by this. And I think if you start to incorporate it more regularly, and if you start to invite different voices more regularly, people will get exhausted, right? And they'll say, oh, why are we always talking about race? And it's like, as a minority, particularly as a young black male, like, I don't have the option to stop talking about it because we've been talking about it for 3 weeks. Every day of my life, I have to be aware of this living in America. And I think, as we start to bring it in more regularly, it'll feel less token. I just want to tell one story and then hear your question. But like, again, to kind of further explain what white privilege is and why I say every day of my life I face this, because nobody has ever called me the N-word to my face, right? No one has ever told me I'm not allowed to eat here. However, I want to tell 2 quick stories to kind of illustrate the black experience, because you can talk, but to just storytelling, I feel, which is why I write poetry, is often most helpful way to make it connect. I was riding my bike with a friend. She was white, and we were riding through this really nice neighborhood that had these cool houses in Long Beach. And so we were just looking at
how old were you?
This was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
And we were appreciating the beautiful architecture, and she got tired because we'd been riding for a while. She goes, "Hey, can we take a break real quick?" I said, "Oh yeah, let's bike out of the neighborhood. There's like a park, like not too far, like just a few minutes away." She goes, "Oh no, I'm tired. I just want to sit down and take a break right here on this curb." And she just wanted to sit down in front of, like, in the middle of this neighborhood in front of a house. And I was like, "Nah, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, let's get on our bikes and go." And she was like, No, like, we'll just rest a few minutes. And I was like, "No, we're not gonna rest a few minutes. Let's go." And she got upset, and she thought I was being controlling, but she came. So we got to the park, and I said, "Look, I know you didn't notice this, but for me, I felt uncomfortable sitting down that neighborhood because as we were riding around, people were looking out their windows. There was a guy who was watering his grass. As soon as we turned on his street, he literally watched us the whole time." Says, "I just felt like we were being watched, particularly because I was black, and I just didn't feel comfortable." And at the time, she goes, yeah, whatever. It was kind of like, "I think you're hypersensitive and you're exaggerating, but whatever." So that was the end of that. Then, a few months later, I'm going to visit a friend in another neighborhood that was predominantly white. And we were supposed to meet at 10 o'clock. But I got there a little early. It was like 9:30, and he was still asleep. And so I texted him. He didn't answer. So I just sat in my car. And I was sitting in my car for about 20 minutes. I was on my phone, checking my email on Instagram, just chilling. 9:30 in the morning and doing nothing. All of a sudden, in my rear view mirror, I see a police walking up to my car with his hand on his gun. Mm-hmm. He walks up to my car and he says, "Don't reach for it, but do you have your ID?" And I said, yeah. And he goes, "Let me see your ID." "Well, can I reach for it? Because you just told me not to." "Wait a second." Calls another police. By the end of this ordeal, there was 4 police cars and 5 police surrounding my thing. And then I give him my ID. They run my plates. He goes, "Can you get out the car for me?" Now, he phrased it like a question, but he barked it like a command. And I knew, I was like, I hadn't broken any laws. The car was registered in my name. I said, "No, I'm not going to get out the car," because since he phrased it like a question, that would have been consent for him to search my car and search me. I said, "No, I'm not getting out the car." I said, "What is the problem?" I said, "Officer, is it illegal to sit in your own car?" And he says, "Well, we got a call from someone that said someone suspicious looking had been sitting in their car for over an hour, ducking every time someone walked by." And I said, "Well, officer, I've only been here for 20 minutes, not an hour. I don't exactly know what you mean by suspicious looking, but I have an idea. And I have not ducked once. I didn't duck or look uneasy or try to run when you even walked up and you're an officer. So somebody is lying. Either the person who called you was lying or you're lying." And this ordeal went on for a good 40 minutes. Finally, my friend wakes up, comes outside, and it's just a lot of mess. I never got out of my car. I never let them search me because I was afraid. I don't know what would have happened, how it would have escalated, what they might have planted. But at the end of the day, I went back and I called my other friend. And I said, "Hey, let me tell you what happened to me today." Mm-hmm. Now, you remember when we were riding our bikes and you thought I was paranoid for feeling that way? Well, here, I was sitting in a similar neighborhood and all of this happened. And so what I tell people is the injustice is not just when the cops show up because some racist neighbor called. The injustice is even in the first story. Yeah. She could just ride her bike and sit down and take a rest on the sidewalk without thinking about it. Mm-hmm. But that's white privilege, to just be free and just exist. Whereas me, I'm constantly aware of my racial environment. And even when something doesn't happen, I'm looking around because I know the stereotypes about folks who look like me, about young black males who dress hip hop. I know what people think about me without knowing me. And so even when nothing happens in our heads, I'm having a different experience. She was just riding her bike, having fun. Right. And I was like, that's white privilege, to just be. Black folks don't have that luxury. Right. And this is happening in California, not in the South, not in Alabama. Right. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy, what were you going to ask?
Yeah, so that's actually, I'm glad that story happened too, because we could tie it to two things. So I have attention and then an opportunity is how I want to frame it. Propaganda said something interesting on another podcast I listened to about how, local churches typically reflect the community that they're in. Mm-hmm. So, a church pops up in, suburban white neighborhood, wherever, similar to probably some places you're talking about. And to Mike's point, you have like that token feeling of like, okay, well, we'll have a brother come and share like once a year or whatever, just to show we're quote unquote diverse. Right. Mm-hmm. But I think the two things you're talking about, which is interesting, is how we've inherited a theology that is predominantly post-European, white American focused. Mm-hmm. And then, so it's like, there's something to me that's very systematic, that's very problematic in all of that. Cause you can't, if you're talking about, okay, because I think it's fair to make an argument for the alteration of more ethnic diversity from authoritative voice in a church, like with regular speakers and really engaging that. And naturally, your community would probably start to change a little bit because of your locale. And maybe in like a big mega church conversation where information is widespread through video, through audio and everything, like everyone knows what's going on at Elevation or over at Saddleback because everyone can access it at any given time. But that's 6% of the entire churches in the United States, whereas the majority of churches, like overwhelming by like 80%, are under 500 to 100 people, where they might just be small churches in these, kind of these areas that aren't quite as diverse. So to me, the tension is, how do you break that mode of affinity where it's like, well, this is like my parents' church, for example, like in Iowa when they lived there for 10 years, like the church was literally down the street at the end of their house. There's probably about maybe like 700 people that go to their church, predominantly white. It's in the middle of Iowa in the Midwest. And what does it look like for them to shake that theology, to have a broader, view of what we're talking about without it seeming superficial, without it seeming like, well, why are you trying to bring in these cultural conversations when this is our local culture? And if the church's purpose in their area is to serve that local culture, what becomes the purpose of the church at that point? Trying to hold an agenda to broaden diversity or to serve the local needs of their people based on who they are, how they do things, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the tension. And then the opportunity that I'm curious about but nowadays, because of widespread information, because of exposure and everything else, is it an excuse for us to just kind of say, oh, well, this isn't really an issue, but obviously if you show up and you do a thing, you can't walk down their streets without dealing with that. So what's your thoughts on that?
No, totally. First of all, I agree. Like, I think if you're talking about the ethnic makeup of a church, the best thing a church could be is reflective of its community. I went to church when I lived in Chicago on the South Side and 79th Street. It's an all black neighborhood for miles and miles and miles. You won't see nothing but a black person. And our church was all black. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think a church in an all white suburb being all white is a problem. But for me, when it comes to the theology, right? It's an understanding that this isn't just something that, well, churches in the big city with diversity, they need to be not racist. You know what I mean? Right. It's like this actually helps you understand the gospel better, right? Even if most of your operations happen in a small local community, the church has always been global. Yeah, it is to the nations. Right. Make disciples of all nations.
Someone's preaching.
It's for everyone, right? And so it's like, and that's the thing, it's not seeking it out because it particularly happens to be relevant to your community because you have a bunch of Filipinos in your community. It's as a person who following the gospel of Jesus, which is always for the nations, we become more like God when we learn from all cultures created in the image of God, right? We actually become better Christians. Boom. That's what it is. It will improve your theology and your love and your Christ likeness. That's why you value it, not because there's black people in your community that don't feel welcome, which probably might be true as well. But yeah, that's so good. I'm like, that's the
so why haven't can I switch a gear, or did you have something
That's
else?
fine. I guess the follow up thought I have to that then is in a way I feel like what we're talking about then is we're trying to speak directly to the orientation and hearts of people. Because we can speak largely to the institutions and the organizations, but at that point we're talking about trying to change systematic authoritative power.
Yeah.
But it's like if independent hearts don't change to realize there's a better theology than to just inherit whatever I'm given where I was raised and who sits around me in church, then if we don't independently take those opportunities to think larger and wider in that way, then I think that we'll just pass on that continued inheritance of all of that. Because I think that's where I'm trying to think of like being an active person in my community to bring about that kind of change. And it's like, well, what am I speaking to and who am I speaking to? Am I trying to, increase my power as a, ethnic leader to then be in a place to make the change? Or am I trying to figure out ways to speak to the larger authority to then expect them to make a systematic change? And I think that's kind of been my tension the past couple of years with just watching everything taking place and like, it seems like the hardest but yet most effective focus thing is to how do we focus on people, and really work on people.
And the thing is, even if you exist in one particular community, I'm talking predominantly about the American context, like with what we have and the way our lives are, like none of us, our influence reaches beyond that. If you have a Facebook, right? You might live in one community, but if you went to college and made a bunch of friends and then moved back to your small town, you still have friends from all over, And so it's like you can say, oh, this isn't relevant to me. But every time you post your opinion on Facebook, you're preaching that truth, whatever it is, to people from all different parts of the country and maybe even world, right? And with our jobs, the world is so connected and so small now. If you don't have a Facebook, if you vote, you know what I'm saying? The people you vote for, the
Street
president,
sweeper.
they all affect the whole nation. They affect the whole. So
let me.
it seems like an excuse.
Andy, you're done.
Yeah,
I'm cutting you off because I got a couple burning questions over this direction. Why? So you've come and you've done spoken word in our community. And my sense is you do that a lot. So why haven't you given up on the white evangelical subculture? Why do you still seek to influence to speak into that? So I'm curious about that.
Yeah. There's a few reasons. Actually, a few years ago, I was performing at this predominantly white event, and this white guy came up to me and he said, Micah, God has called you to a very strange and difficult mission field. White people.
Was he white?
He was white.
Oh, perfect.
He was white, but he grew up in West Africa.
Got it.
Okay.
And so he was like, he had all this tension in himself. And he's like, I just feel like the way you communicate things like this. And when he said that, I was like, no, heck no. I do not want to be my mission to the white people. Like, no, that's not like my heart was always, for black folks, for helping, oppressed communities, impoverished communities, all these things. But when he said it, and when I thought about where I grew up, then my education and all of my experiences, I do feel like I've been kind of uniquely fashioned to be a bridge and to communicate things, like struggling for 4 years of my school, figuring out how to exist in that environment, prepared me and it gave me the skill set to have these tough conversations without just snapping on people, because I had to learn how to do that if I was going to stay sane, and not just be that angry black person at this white Christian school. So, but overall, why I haven't given up? A few reasons. One, I realized that my frustration with the church was really a frustration just with the American institution and expression of it, which is not what the church actually is.
Preach.
And traveling and seeing expressions of church in different cultures that are nothing like here, I'm like, oh, I don't hate the church.
Right.
I hate this particular institution that has expired. Maybe there was a time where this was thriving, but it's not. I tell people all the time, I'm like, let's just think, if we could erase the template in our heads as to what a church is. Okay, I'm gonna tell two quick stories. There's this one, I was performing at this church plant, was 11 weeks old, and before I got there, the pastor was like, yeah, we want to be a church that's different and reach the unreached, and we want to be a church for people who hate church and all this stuff, whatever. And then I get there, And it's like coffee and donuts outside. 3 to 5 worship songs, announcements, 40-minute sermon.
Yeah.
And I was like, it wasn't bad, but it felt like everything else.
Right.
But he was talking like they were doing this revolutionary thing. And so I say,
street sweeper.
Imagine if we didn't have this idea of what church was like.
Right.
And we converted to believing in Jesus. And the group of us said, hey, let's meet once a week to fellowship, to encourage each other as a community, and to grow in our faith and to worship God together. What do you want to do? And one person was like, hey, I have an idea. How about we come together, this whole community, all of us, and we designate one man to talk for an hour every week, and then we go home.
That'll never work. That'll never work. That's ridiculous.
You would look at him like they were crazy.
Right.
What? We're trying to foster community here.
Right.
We're trying to encourage each other and pray and live and do life together. And you think that's the stupidest idea ever? Like, why would we have only one person and the same person every week talk at us? Right? Like, I'm like, oh, that's not what church is. And so, first of all, realizing I don't hate the church. I hate one cultural expression of it. And then the other thing is, and I know, whatever, people might take this some way, but like, I believe in the Bible. I'm not a Bibleite, right? I believe in the church. I'm not a churchite. I'm a Christian. Like, the word means to be like Christ or little Christ. And so for me, when I get frustrated with my faith and all these things, I go back to Jesus and I go to the scriptures and I read the gospels and I see who Jesus was and how he treated people and how he loved the outcast and the least of these and poor and women and minorities. And a lot of what he does and how he lives challenges me, but nothing about the person of Christ embarrasses me or makes me feel like I don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I look and I say, that's hard, but I believe in it with all my heart. And if I am known as someone who is Christ-like or follows Christ or a Christian until the day that I die, every time I look at Jesus, I'm cool. Like, I will never give up on that. And then just the understanding that, yes, the church is full of broken people. Like, and I don't expect people to have perfect theology or to be woke or to none of it. It's like, like, we are all in process. And so I have a lot of grace for folks who are in process, who have blind spots. And then I have a lot of rebukes for those who are in positions of leadership who should know better.
But it's interesting the way that you do your art, and that's what I want to get to. I actually want to hear you, because the rebukes come in a way that is very surprising and a way that's almost more compelling than if they were just straightforward.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think you've really stumbled onto that's beautiful is an ability to have those hard conversations in ways that are still hard, but they allow people to hear and enter in. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your art. I love the way you explained what spoken word is and why you do it. And give us an example if you would, and tell us the context of it. Yeah,
for sure. So for those unfamiliar, spoken word poetry is poetry meant to be performed instead of read on a page. So it's like the difference between writing a script for a film and writing a novel. If you write a novel, you expect people to read it on paper. If you write a script, you don't want people to read it. You want them to watch the actors perform what you've written. So it's poetry meant to be performed. Why I do it, during my college years, I was actually home for the summer in Long Beach, and someone invited me to an open mic in LA. And it was for spoken word poetry. I'd seen spoken word on YouTube, but I'd never seen it live before. And I go into this room full of complete strangers, and it wasn't a religious thing. It was just a community thing. And person after person gets up there and just pours their heart out.
I love it.
And it was like people from different cultures, different beliefs. They were sharing things that you wouldn't tell your best friend, that you'd write in your journal and hope nobody ever sees. They were sharing things that I had thought and went through, but when I thought those things and when I went through those things in my head, I was too afraid to tell anyone because I'm the only person in the world who's thought like this. People would think I'm crazy but then I see other folks saying the same things I was thinking. I was like, oh, and so it helped me realize I'm not as alone as I thought. So it was just, I'd never been in any any group of friends or any small group where vulnerability like that was as welcomed, right? But then another thing, and that's just interesting about art. You're allowed to be vulnerable. You know, if you're in a conversation with your friend and you're like, you know, sometimes like I just really hate everything and I want to like kill my wife and commit suicide. You know, they'd be like, you have an issue. You need to go to a counselor. But like Eminem can make a rap song about hating everything and wanting to kill his daughter and blow his brains out, and people are like, oh, me too, right? So, like,
oh, that's so good.
Yeah, like for whatever reason, you know, if someone is complaining about never finding love, you'd be like, you're so annoying. And then, you know, John Mayer can make a whole album about wanting love, and so it was. I realized that artistic expression was a place where vulnerability was allowed, and without being judged. So that drew me to it. And then the other thing was, I started hanging out at open mics a whole lot, and I realized although the vulnerability was beautiful, there was like nothing after that. It was like we like everyone was just confessing. It's like life sucks, but it's better since it sucks for all of us, and it just felt like commiseration. Right. And so I thought, man, is it possible to be that vulnerable, but also in an authentic way have hope? Not throw a Jesus Band-Aid on top of it, but to say, we're not afraid of the brokenness, but we actually have something to say to it. Right. You know? And so that was kind of my motivation for starting spoken word.
I love it.
This particular...
reconstructive spoken word.
Yeah, you know, and so... And it was another interesting aspect of it was, there's people who would never accept an invitation to church. But if you're able to talk about your faith in a compelling way, in poetry, they'll listen.
Absolutely.
You know, and so
because it's real to you.
Exactly. And they'll respect it and they'll chew on it. So yeah, I'll share a poem kind of in context of this racial conversation. I think one of the reasons that I can be a bridge, because I understand both sides because of my experiences. And when I was in Chicago, I got involved in this ministry that would go into this juvenile detention center. And it was a temporary holding facility for teenagers who had committed crimes, and they were awaiting trial. So they'd be there anywhere from like a few weeks to like 9 months. So they were like between the ages of 11 and 18. And we would go in there week after week, and we would just hang out. We'd bring snacks. You know, we'd talk about anything they want. We could talk about basketball. We could talk about faith. We could pray with them. And week after week, I went in there, and I couldn't help but notice the overwhelming majority, about 90% of the kids in there, were black. And I thought to myself, Chicago is a huge city. Millions of people live here. Dozens and dozens of cultures. How is it that the overwhelming majority of the teenage criminals are all black? And it really started messing with me. I really started to think, man, are black people just more sinful than other people? How is this possible? And it bothered me. And then one week I went there, and there was a kid who was the kindest kid you would ever meet. And he says, hey, Mikey, you want to know how I got in here? And I said, yeah, man, if you want to share. And so he goes, well, I was born on the South Side, which is an all black neighborhood and predominantly impoverished. Because I was born on the South Side. It's me, my mom, and my little sister. He says, I'm 14 years old. It's wintertime in Chicago. My mom got laid off her job, and she was having trouble paying rent. And our landlord kept threatening to kick us out and be homeless and below 0 degrees. Also, my little sister kept crying every night because my mom couldn't afford to buy food. We had no dinner. And he goes, I got sick of hearing my baby sister cry and be hungry. I got sick of seeing my mom stressed out because she thought we were about to be homeless in, you know, negative 30 weather. He goes, I'm 14. I wanted to help, but you got to be 16 to get a real job. He says, so I never did drugs in my life before. I never sold drugs in my life before, but I knew a lot of the homies in my neighborhood sold drugs and made money. He says, so I went to the drug dealers and I said, can you teach me how to sell drugs? Because I started selling drugs, paying rent, buying groceries. I did that for months until I got busted by an undercover cop. He says, you know, the worst part about being in here is I don't know if my mom and my sister are sleeping out in the cold. I don't know if they have anything to eat, and I can't do nothing about it. And man, Like when you're looking at things from the outside in, a lot of Christians, a lot of white Christians, they have these really like just cold moral standards, this heartless morality that says, hey, selling drugs is wrong. If you do the crime, you pay the time. But then if you sit down and you hear his story, like in his 14-year-old mind, he's choosing between being homeless and hungry in Chicago with his whole family or selling drugs. There is a difference. There's a difference between someone who just has no respect for law and is lazy and doesn't want to get a real job, and someone who out of desperation is willing to do something that is risking their own freedom, right? And one of my favorite verses in the Bible, it says, do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his hunger, right? God is the one who told us stealing is wrong. But there's a difference between someone who steals out of disregard for someone else's property and someone who steals because they are hungry and they're desperate. There's a difference between someone who illegally crosses the border because they have no respect for the nation and someone who says, my family is dying, or my city is getting bombed in war, or we are starving because of poverty. Yes, I'm willing to break a law to save the lives of my children and to ensure they have a better future than me. Do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his hunger. So that's where this poem comes from. It's titled Stealing Bread. Do not make me the exception to your stereotype. Do not use my success as evidence to condemn my brothers lazy. This land's booby traps simply missed me. Don't dare you disrespect my kin. I am no greater or less than them. You will cause division between us no more. Our less fortunate will be loved, not blamed for making the rest of us look bad, and I refuse to despise a poor man for stealing bread. We are poor men stealing bread, and I suggest you not despise us, or you just might anger God. If you are not afraid, make your way to any metropolis, USA. Go to the poor side of town, the hood side of town, the ghetto side of town, and what do you see? Poverty is supposed to be colorblind, but it is so closely tied to blackness. Terms used for low economic status are now synonymous with a culture, a people. In American minds, black folks do not suffer from poverty. We are poverty. We are hood. We are ghetto. And we like it that way. Don't you hear how we rap about it? Remember how slaves used to sing about picking cotton? Oh, but slavery is done with. Just like segregation, this nation elected a black president. Anyone who doesn't succeed is just making bad decisions. Black on black crime, remember? Alcohol and substance abuse. Absent black fathers too. If black people would just be better people, then we would be better, right? Look me in the eye. You warn your children not to step foot in the neighborhoods that ours have no choice but to be raised in. Then play ignorant as if success has nothing to do with the situations we are born into. As if most of us just don't want it as much as most of you. Your average child will thrive while our exceptional might make it out alive. So look me in the eye and tell me you believe we chose this. Tell me we're poor on purpose. Tell me you believe we like being hungry. Tell me we'd rather sell drugs than have a career. Tell me we deserve to go to jail. Tell me you believe we hate ourselves. Tell me we're lazy. Tell me we're ghetto. Look me in the eye. We are poor men stealing bread. And I suggest you not despise us.
Oh, so good, dude. One of the things that spoken word does, it's meant to be seen. And so, to hear it is one thing, to watch Micah do it's another. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what's so compelling, I think, is for me, you're somebody has every reason to be cynical and every reason to give up on the church. You have every reason to embrace, something else. And yet, the way God has gifted you, to speak truth to power and to speak truth to a culture, I think it's a beautiful thing. And so our excitement, once we've had you at Vox a couple of times, it's just like, oh my goodness, we've got to get to know you more, because I being a prophet's a hard thing. If you're too far out ahead, no one listens. And if you're too close, you've got nothing to say. And so there's this weird fringe that you have to walk, and I think you do that very well. Is there, are there places, and I'm assuming there are places where your work is on display, whether it's albums or iTunes or whatever. It's,
yeah, for sure.
Throw that out there.
I have a lot of videos online on my website. It's just my name, micahbournes.com, MICAHBOURNES.com. So you can just watch a lot of videos on there. But also, all of my albums, and I have recordings and I have albums of poetry set to music. I have a hip hop EP and a full length blues album. Those are all on all the streaming services as well as iTunes, but they're also free downloads through my Bandcamp, which is just micahbournes.bandcamp.com. I love Instagram. I'm working on new material. I'm working on my first full-length hip-hop album and a poetry EP that hopefully will both be released later this year. And so if you want to know when that comes out, you can follow me on Instagram or subscribe to my mailing list on my website.
Dang.
Yeah.
Could you do something about bald people? Just, the struggles. You walk through a pharmacy and there's all the shampoo, and you're like, not for me. And you have something about shampoo, which is awesome.
I do.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So bro, thank you, man. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for not giving up on the tough conversations. I think you are uniquely gifted to have them in a compelling way. So brothers and sisters, please check him out. He is amazing, and we're huge fans. So thanks for your time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Appreciate it, my man. Andy, anything you want to close with?
Nope. Thanks a lot, Micah. Appreciate it.
All right, sounds good.
Good to be here.
Told you, man, that guy rocks.
Boom.
And again, like I said in the interview, seeing him is different than, just listening to it. But check out his stuff. It's Michael Bournes.
You just said Michael Bournes.
Dang it. Golly,
Micah Bournes.
Yeah, spell it.
MICAH BOURNES.
Man, I hope he doesn't listen, because I'm a hack. I grew up in Ohio, and the weirdest thing we had to pronounce, was Chi-Chi's. That was our Mexican restaurant, was Chi-Chi's, and so that was like literally the extent of my enculturation.
Wait, say my last name.
Lara.
You got it that time.
Not Laura.
Not Laura.
It's Lara. And yep.
It's Spanish.
Yes. No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
So let me get this straight. You're Caucasian/Filipino with a Spanish last name?
Yeah, because Spain colonized Philippines.
Damn you.
It's part of the
Spain.
Philippine colonization.
Well,
anyhow.
All right. We've all been colonized at some point. I was an Anglo,
especially once you're over the age of 40.
Oh my goodness, I'm colonized by everything. Jeez.
Oh, that was a colon joke. You didn't get it.
Colonized. I've been colonized. It's the age of 50, by the way. But you know what? It sounds so fun. I might just get it checked sooner.
I think they're recommending you get it checked earlier nowadays.
I
think so.
Okay.
Anyhow.
So anyway, my brothers and sisters, hope you enjoyed that. We just love having Micah around, and we want you to support his work if you're able to. We've got some big guests coming up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you who.
Nope.
But because of the success of the Andy-less episode, I'm now able to book some guests of significant stature. So I'm trying to get Mr. T. No, wouldn't that be the greatest thing? Like, hey, Mr. T, would you do a podcast?
Did you watch him on Dancing with the Stars?
I've never seen that show.
He's on this season.
Is it?
It's awful.
Oh, you know what would be fun? It would be a podcast series of 80s celebrities that are just total has-beens.
Oh, it's so good.
You know what I mean?
I love that idea.
I think that would be really fun. Like Ricky Schroeder. What's he doing? He was Silver Spoons.
Yep.
Justine Bateman.
Yep.
Right? She was on Family Ties, right?
Yeah.
Alyssa Milano.
Right. There's big ones. Imagine Rob Lowe, Amelia S. the entire Breakfast Club cast.
Yeah, but they're doing stuff.
Yeah, they're doing stuff.
You know
but
what I watched
still
the other day?
Kinda...
Young Guns.
Yeah, so good.
Lou Diamond
River
Phillips.
Phoenix.
What's Lou Diamond Phillips doing?
I don't know.
Great
question. Well, we know what Mr. T's doing.
Yes, seriously. So anyway, I don't know what that was for, but we've got some big guests, and I mean not just big in size. I mean, big names.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're excited about that. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we are thrilled to be a part of your life, and always love your feedback at hello@voxpodcast.com, or you can show up on a Sunday morning if you're really desperate for a nap, and you can 9 at 11 and make an appearance. And we have podcasters come up and say hi, and we just love that you stop by and say hello. So thanks for that. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you, particularly if your name is French. Amen and amen.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Vox Podcast. Learn more about us at voxpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at the Vox Podcast, and now support us on Patreon at patreon.com/voxpodcast.